Hello and welcome to ANI Interviews. I am Naman Yadav. The war in Gaza has finally ended after 2 long years. Hamas and Israel have signed the first phase of a peace deal brokered by US President Donald Trump. But will this deal really bring peace or just a pause in the fighting? What lies ahead of Prime Minister Netanyahu's life politically? And what are the biggest challenges in implementing the Gaza peace plan? Joining us today is Professor Benny Morris, Israeli historian and author. I'll start with your article. In your article, you said the Hamas-Israel peace deal is doomed to fail.
No, I don't think I put it as strongly as that. I would say there's a good possibility that it will fail.
Okay, but you mentioned 3 points. You said it ignores deep ideological, historical, and political barriers on both sides. Can you describe one by one all these barriers that why it is likely to fail?
Well, to begin with, the Hamas has already stated that it will not accept Trump's plan that calls for their disarmament. They will not give up their arms. They will not give up their arms, so they say, because they want to continue to fight Israel. Their ideology calls for Israel's destruction and their part in Israel's destruction. Also, they have internal enemies, and if they give up their arms, they are likely to be fired at, shot at, killed by those internal enemies. In fact, there have been clashes in the Gaza Strip during the past 24 hours between Hamas and various clans who oppose them inside the Gaza Strip. Israel apart from this. So that's one thing. The second thing is the present Israeli government and most Israelis oppose the establishment of a Palestinian state. This is something which in some way is augured in the Trump plan. Netanyahu and his colleagues, and I fear most Israelis by now, believe that the establishment of a Palestinian state will be an existential threat to Israel's existence. This is partly due to believing that any Palestinian state will eventually be taken over by Islamists like the Hamas organization, because all recent opinion polls have shown that what the Hamas does and has done is supported by most Palestinians, both in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. If Israel doesn't accept a two-state solution, the establishment of a Palestinian state next to Israel, I don't see how the Palestinians will give up their struggle against Israel. And also, as I say, I don't see how they will give up their struggle against Israel because they want Israel to be destroyed. They don't want Israel to exist. This is Hamas's public posture, public official position, and most Palestinians in their hearts also agree with this. They don't want Israel to exist.
Critics in USA and Israel have been saying that Trump has given a lifeline to Netanyahu. Netanyahu was not successful in completely destroying Hamas in the last 2 years, and he was dragging the war and it was destroying US image globally and Israel's image globally. So he has been given a lifeline by Trump. Do you agree with that?
Well, in some way that's true. It gave Netanyahu an out from pursuing the latest offensive he had launched to supposedly destroy the Hamas completely. Most Israelis opposed and oppose such a new offensive because it will end up with the death of a lot of Israeli soldiers and maybe the deaths of the hostages. That was the expectation. Also, some of Israelis are aware that a new Israeli offensive would probably end up killing lots more Palestinian civilians in the Gaza Strip. Again, something which will further undermine Israel's standing prestige position in the world, among the public in the West at least, in the Western states. So Netanyahu was willing to proceed with this new offensive. It began in September, but was reluctant to go through with it, and the army itself was opposed to launching this offensive. So probably he was happy that Trump sort of gave him this lifeline to get out of it. And I think he was also interested in appeasing the Israeli opposition, which has been pressing the hostage issue. I think Netanyahu understood that the hostages would not be saved by a new Israeli offensive. They would probably just die in the process of that offensive. So he had good reasons not to go forward with the offensive. Um, on the other hand, I think he understands, and this is my fear as well, that no one is going to disarm the Hamas. The Hamas will not give up its arms, will continue to rule over the Gaza Strip population, the 2.3 million Arabs who live in the Gaza Strip, and will eventually resurge. It will eventually revitalize itself. It will eventually import new weapons and induct new conscripts into its forces, and will again present Israel with a threat as it did on the 7th of October. So the problem will rebound and continue for Israel down the years.
Professor, two questions I would like to ask. The one is, do you think that Israel's attack on Hamas leadership in Qatar, it weakened Bibi's position worldwide, it weakened his position in front of Trump's eyes also, and it pushed him to sign the peace deal?
I think Trump is a man who likes success. Had Israel's strike in Doha, Qatar, killed the leadership of the Hamas as it was supposed to do, I think Trump would have been quite happy with it. He doesn't like losers. But when it failed, it embarrassed Trump because it was an attack on the soil of a Trump ally, Qatar, which is itself a problem. But Qatar is the main supporter politically and financially of the Hamas in the Arab world. So it's in some way ridiculous that Qatar is an American ally or a mediator between Israel and the Hamas. It's simply a Hamas supporter. There's an absurdity here. But in any case, the failure of the strike certainly embarrassed Trump and certainly embarrassed Israel, and in some way helped to solidify the Trump-Qatar connection alliance. Trump gave Qatar a security guarantee afterwards and publicly forbade Israel to again attack anybody on Qatari soil. And in some way this pressured Netanyahu also to accept the Trump plan.
Where do you see Netanyahu's political future going on after this peace deal? Trump has called on Israel president to pardon him. Netanyahu has been battling charges of bribery, fraud, and breach of trust in 3 cases. Could such a pardon take place, and how do you see his political future shaping up?
Well, given the nature of our President Herzog, whom I do not respect, he could well give Netanyahu a pardon, as Trump half-jokingly said in his address to the Israeli parliament, the Knesset, on Monday. But I'm not sure it's possible. I'm not sure that Herzog can overcome public feeling, which basically is detestation of the Israeli Prime Minister, of Netanyahu today. Most Israelis do not think he should be Prime Minister, do not think he's an honest man, he's a corrupt official, do not think he's very successful or competent. I mean, he showed total incompetence on the 7th of October and in the months leading up to the 7th of October, and should be, if you like, put on trial for his mismanagement of Israel up to and on the 7th of October. He, of course, casts off all blame. He says it's the army, he says it's the intelligence people who failed, not him. But most Israelis disagree. Most Israelis want the establishment of a judicial commission of inquiry, which I am sure will find Netanyahu supremely guilty of what happened and put the blame on him. So I don't think he has much of a future. I think there will be elections in the coming months, by October certainly. That's what Israeli tradition, we don't have a constitution, but that's what Israeli tradition says should happen. By October there must be elections, and all opinion polls show that he will lose in these elections if he runs at the head of the Likud.
Is there any part of Trump's Gaza peace plan that you think that it is worth building on? Or do you think it's really very idealistic? Is there any point that you agree?
I think in general it's a good plan. In general, introducing into the Gaza Strip an international administration overseeing some sort of Palestinian government which is non-Hamas makes sense. Also, introducing international forces into the Gaza Strip to disarm the Hamas and quash the Hamas and oust the Hamas from control of the Gaza civilian population is a very good idea. The problem is, I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think any force, American, Pakistani, United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, none of them are going to go after the Hamas. If the Hamas doesn't want to give up its arms, nobody is going to fight Hamas fighters, as they will say, on behalf of Israel. They will say this is a collaboration with Israel, and no Muslim force, and I don't think any Western force, will actually try to disarm the Hamas. The moment the Hamas fighters shoot back, nobody is going to pursue that avenue, I think. The only
Professor,
force which can disarm the Hamas is the Israeli army. But this will require great sacrifice by the Israeli troops, a great sacrifice of civilians in the Gaza Strip, and further sacrifices of Israel's image abroad, because inevitably lots of Gazans will die.
in your opinion, Professor, what has Netanyahu achieved in Gaza in the last 24 months in his war? What has he basically achieved?
Look, certainly the Israeli government has limited, has restricted, has degraded Hamas's forces. I don't think they are now capable of mounting an assault as they did on the 7th of October. And also politically, they are isolated in the Arab world. All the Arab world practically has said Hamas should disarm and shouldn't control the Gaza Strip. At least they say so publicly. Qatar probably believes they should continue to rule the Gaza Strip, and maybe other Islamist elements in the Arab world thinks that Hamas should continue to rule in the Gaza Strip. But at least publicly, they all say Hamas should cease to rule. The question is, how does anybody uproot them from the Gaza Strip? I don't see how that happens.
We have spoken about it. Hamas is not going to give up its arms. They are not going to disarm themselves. And Trump has also implied that he has given Hamas approval to act as a police force for a period of time. How do you think Netanyahu is going to see this? Because these are the latest developments that have been happening in the last 48 hours after signing the peace deal.
Well, I haven't heard this business about Hamas being policemen, though they are acting like policemen in the areas Israel has vacated in the past 48 hours. I don't see this happening. I don't see the Hamas disarming. I don't see an international force going in and fighting them. And I don't see Israel renewing the war full scale against the Hamas. I don't see this happening. But who knows? Look, the Middle East always tends to surprise everybody.
Professor, the mistrust is still there. It has been for decades. It is still there.
No, it's even deepened. It's much deeper than it was 10 and 20 years ago.
It is much deeper. How do you think this peace plan is going to be different? Shall I just say it is just a pause, not a peace in infighting?
You're probably right that probably what we are witnessing now is a pause in the fighting. How long it's going to last, I have no idea. It may actually be a short pause. We don't know. But given what's happening, given the ideology or the ideologies on both sides, I don't see a peace occurring between Israel and the Palestinians in the coming years. I don't see it happening.
Do you think Donald Trump deserves a Nobel Peace Prize for brokering the Gaza peace plan?
I think he deserves a Nobel Peace Prize for making a real effort, and also at least partially succeeding. I mean, he has obtained the release of the Israeli hostages, something Biden was incapable of doing. He has obtained the release of many Palestinian prisoners on behalf of the Arab side, which I'm sure is appreciated by the Arab side. He has obtained a ceasefire at the moment, which is holding sort of during the last few hours at least. All of this is an achievement. Nobody believed this was possible. A few days ago, I'm not sure anybody thought it was possible to achieve the release of the hostages, for example. And it's happened. So he certainly deserves the Peace Prize much more than President Obama deserved it when he received it a few years ago for doing absolutely nothing.
A couple of hours back, Donald Trump has said that a lot of people want to see two-state solution. A lot of people want to see one-state solution. We will have to see. And Trump administration has avoided to mention two-state solution. They have implied that Palestinian Authority and technocrats will be overseeing that everything. How do you see this?
Well, Trump seems to have moved back away from his suggestion in his 20-point plan. Point 19 sort of said he hopes there will be a pathway here to a Palestinian state. Now he's saying, well, a Palestinian state, meaning a two-state solution or a one-state solution or any state solution, all of this is up in the air. I don't know what I support. That's what he's saying. So I think he's moved away from the two-state idea, which, as I said, is opposed by most Israelis. I think he understood this from his talks in Israel on Monday, and therefore he stepped away from this. That's how I see Trump at the moment. Trump doesn't have very solid views. He doesn't have detailed knowledge of anything, certainly not in the Middle East, and knowledge of the conflict requires years of study, and he may have given it a few hours of study, if that.
Professor, it's a very personal question. How do you think October 7th attack, how it has changed the mindset of Israelis, including you?
It's made Israelis much more suspicious of the Palestinians and more rejectionist of Palestinian efforts to achieve statehood. This is basic. I memean, if before the 7th of October there were 30% of Israelis or 40% of Israelis who thought maybe a two-state solution could work, the percent is much, much lower after the 7th of October. Many of the people slaughtered by the Hamas fighters on the 7th of October were kibbutzniks, members of the kibbutzim around the Gaza Strip, who were left-wingers, who supported a two-state solution. Most of those killed were civilians, kibbutz members who supported a two-state solution. I'm not sure if you go to these kibbutzim today and ask them, do they support a two-state solution? I don't think most of them will say yes now.
And how do you justify the killing of women, children, and
I
people?
I don't justify it at all, on either side, except that there's a difference. The Hamasniks who invaded Israel on the 7th of October deliberately wanted to kill civilians and as many as possible and rape civilians as many as possible. This is clear that was their intention, and this is what they did. Israeli killing of civilians, and it's been on a much larger scale in the counteroffensive against the Hamas inside the Gaza Strip, where tens of thousands of civilians have been killed, is not deliberate. Israeli aircraft and artillery and tanks have gone after Hamas fighters. These Hamas fighters were embedded among the civilians in the Gaza Strip deliberately. The Hamas tunnels served only Hamas fighters. They did not allow civilians to enter into these tunnels to escape from the bombings. So inevitably, there was a great deal of collateral damage, and many Palestinian civilians died, but this was not deliberate. Israel even issued, and this is unprecedented in the history of modern warfare, issued warnings to civilians saying, we are going to destroy this and that building, we are going to invade this and this area in Gaza City or in Khan Yunis, please move out of there. And civilians stayed and died among the Hamas fighters Israel was aiming to kill.
Last question, Professor. If you want to take a wild guess, for how long do you think this peace deal is going to hold?
I'm not willing to take a guess. It can hold a few days. The Hamas has already violated it by not returning the bodies of the dead Israeli hostages they hold. So it could tomorrow break down, or it could last for months, because it's in the interest of both peoples at the moment not to renew the full-scale fighting.
Thank you, Professor. Thanks a lot for having a conversation with the ANI.
My pleasure. Bye.